everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to dye yarn using one color of dye in a steam pan, and it may end up feeling tonal, may end up feeling almost like a little bit speckly or something, but we're just going to have some fun and see where it goes. Now, the dye we're going to use today is a 1% stock solution of Dharma Blazing Orange, which, like the name implies, is a fairly saturated orange. And so I want to dye like I do a lot when I layer colors in the pan using this, but this is going to be the only color that I use. I want to take a quick moment to give a huge shout out and thank you to today's lab partner, Belle. Belle, thank you so much for being my lab partner today, and I'm so excited to dye your yarn. If you want to learn how you can become a lab partner for an episode of Dyepot Weekly, go check out the listings in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop, or wait till the end of the video and I'll talk a little bit more about it. Today we are going to dye 300 grams of Knit Picks Swish DK yarn. This yarn is 100% superwash merino, and yeah, you can see that you can easily fit 300 grams in a pan, but we're going to go get some liquid to add in now. I'm starting with 8 cups of water that has 2 tablespoons of white vinegar in it, and this is not very much water yet. If I didn't want the colors to spread out very much, this water level would be pretty fine, but I want the yarn to float a little more because when I add the dye, I don't know if I'll use a spoon to help. We'll sort of see how the color goes, but I want the dye to be able to spread a little bit more. So I'm going to add another 8 cups of water with 2 tablespoons of white vinegar. And here we go. I did pre-soak the yarn for an hour or so. But now the yarn has space to move and float. There are areas when we add the dye where it'll hit the water first and spread, and areas where it might land on the yarn right away. And so I think it'll be really fun. But we'll heat things up, start adding the dye, and then we're going to modify what we do, because the goal is to get some amount of orange coverage, uneven orange coverage on this yarn. And so we will adjust as needed to get something that excites me. We're warming up, and so let's just go ahead and do, oh no. Oh, there we go. I might need to get a new bottle because that did not squeeze out very easily. Yeah. Let me go figure something out here. Okay, I found a paper clip, so I'll see if that will solve the issue. Technically, I could clip part of the top of the squeeze bottle off, but I don't really want to do that because I like the thin hole. So you can see that the color has spread. We've got almost a peach color moving across. And, you know, we could, how much or how little of the dye we use is going to be up to us. But I don't want to go in just lines. I want it to be more random. We could do lines, but I want to have a little bit more fun layering this than just lines. Making sure to try to get the edges, etc. as well. This is going to be sort of like a tone on tone kind of color. And you know how I said I was going to make this up as I go along? I'm now coming in, and you can see that we have some color in here. Now this is not a pre-mixed, like it's a pre-mixed color. So I don't know actually if it breaks at all. But the more we layer the color and the more we end up moving the yarn and layering the color, the more some of this will blend eventually. Like right now, we see all these little patches of color, but the more and more color we add, the more things will average out and the less contrast we'll have overall. And actually, I think in addition to pushing it down, I want to reduce the heat, but I'm not going to wait very long to flip. Because again, I don't mind if our colors spread out. And what's interesting is that color I see left is very, very yellow. And that is very interesting and gives a sense of how if I was dip dyeing into this color, maybe it would break. Now, with the second layer, the goal is to see as much white as possible. I don't want to be focusing on like too much on stuff that's already dyed, although a little bit is definitely not a problem. And yeah, we're just gonna have fun with this. And I don't know, this is something that I haven't really done all one color very much, and blazing orange is also a color I don't know about very well. So if I was doing this with a color I knew broke really dramatically, like say purple pop, these tiny patches of color would not spread very much at all. Plus then the color would break, so we'd see like purple specks with a pink backdrop, and that's fun. This is a type of colorway, I think I did one very similar to this with radioactive and then stopped, but today I just am in the mood to push it and see where we end up if we keep building the color more and more, because I like building the color this way with multiple colors. And so that just made me curious what would happen if I do it with mostly one color. So this time as I flip it, I'm trying to open it up a little bit to expose areas that have not really had color yet. The reason why it's a tiny bit harder to do this in this case than it is in some of my other dyeing projects is that right now we have so much water that, you know, when I put something in place, it's not necessarily staying. But you can see that we are building up our color, and I don't know, I just find this fun, soothing, exciting. If I were to wait more time between moving the dye with each round, then the colors wouldn't soften as much as they have. But the goal is just to have a little bit of fun with it, and I mean scribble, or maybe I should just call this scribble dyeing. But I enjoy layering it. Now, we could do something like this, where we are layering the same color on top of itself, but using, say, the turkey baster or something thicker. So we apply the dye in thicker lines, thicker amounts at once, and they'll still be spread and layering, but you won't have some of these tiny things that'll knit up almost more like a speckle. So that will be, I guess, less present. But everything ultimately comes down to preference. There's the zip tie. And so now we're reaching a point when I flip that we're not going to necessarily see huge, we might see some, but huge patches that had no color, because, you know, we're getting more and more. And so, yeah, I think that I'm just enjoying this and really was wanting to play with this technique, and I am enjoying where we're ending up. Orange is not my personal favorite color, and I know, like, if I poll people, a lot of people feel similarly to me in that respect. But I do really appreciate it. It did used to be my 8-year-old's favorite color. I think now he says he doesn't like orange anymore, and I don't know how long that's gonna last or if that's true. But from the time he was 1, he showed a clear preference for orange. He would take all the orange crayons and hold them in a hand and play with other colors, and it was very, very cute. So yeah, I'm having fun with this. I am not sure how well this is showing up on camera. I'm still not sure. Like, you can see, I can see a bit softly where I put those scribbles. And in some areas where it's been moved more, you can see little like speck pops of color. But I will acknowledge the camera is definitely struggling to keep up with this much yellow and orange. And so we started with something higher contrast and we're headed towards something more subtle. Now, this is not the most time effective technique that we could possibly do. Like if you really wanted to make a tonal, this is not the fastest way to do it. The fastest way is put your yarn in a pot and, you know, apply dye and just let it soak. But I was just kind of curious to see what we would be able to create starting with one color this way. And mainly, I was filming a Leave No Dye Behind where I was playing around with different ways of layering in tonals. And this isn't exactly what I was referring to with layering colors in a steam pan, but actually I will probably film that what I had in my brain next. But this was something, as I was going through some of the dye stocks I had, this was something I wanted to do. And this time I'm not even pressing. I'm just going for flip. And you can see more and more color is coming into the pot. And it is softening up and it's really, really fun. It feels very, very flame-like to me and I'm really enjoying that. But yeah, this is something that it would not be easy to dye like 50 skeins with this kind of technique. I mean, it would make more sense to do some kettle dyeing first and then layer on color a bit, but I mean, the thing with dyeing yarn is that they're your paints, your colors, your way to play, and you can play with it any way you want. Okay, I'm getting pretty happy with the coverage that we have. I'm really enjoying this color, but I am checking the yarn to see if I have any patches that feel underrepresented when it comes to color, especially like up around the tie. There might be some spots. I'm gonna let this middle skein lay on top of that one a little bit because I feel like it doesn't get quite as much color. But I still have plenty of dye left. Yeah, in general these days, I typically only make a large stock solution that I put in a bottle if I am doing a special like event or I'm making a lot more of a colorway. So like for dyeing for Hanukkah or when I did a dyeing project for Valentine's Day and things like that. With the exception of a couple primaries and black or navy. I like to have some of those colors just on hand all the time because they come in handy. I don't know, there's just like a randomness to this that is pleasing, and I'm afraid on camera it's gonna look all like one color and that the subtlety in here isn't gonna come through in the same way. But yeah, what am I gonna title this video? Maybe like Scribble dyeing a tonal yarn? Layering one color over and over. But the way that this color is working out and effects like this vary so much. They depend so much on the color that you're using, again. Because if we had a color that was striking a lot faster or a lot slower, really either way, that would change what we're seeing in the way that these colors are behaving. So I'm trying to focus on our middle skein a little bit more. I think adding the dye and then moving it is really what is softening it here. But I don't mind if we do have some areas where you can see it a little bit more. But really, this has been, has it only been 5 minutes? For real? I've probably edited the clip down a bit, but I'm surprised because it's felt like I've been doing this a bit longer. But I think what I want to do right now is let things sit a little bit. I do have a little bit of our dye left. This is a 500 milliliter bottle, and so I'm estimating we had around 300 milliliters of dye. I'm not entirely sure, but I do want to let this heat let us start to absorb some more of those yellows, and then after 15 minutes, let's come back, move the yarn, and decide if I want to add more color. You can get more control over your tonals dyeing them more spread out in a steam pan because you can decide, okay, in this area I want more color. Now, when it comes to kettle dyeing tonals, at this stage, I think my favorite way to do it is to add half of the total amount of dye I want to use, dye the yarn, remove the yarn after a very short period of time, add the rest of the dye, stir things up, move my zip ties, and then add the yarn back in, because this softens some of that tonal variation you can get while still letting you have tonal variation in there. And so that's one of my favorite ways to do it right now. But when I was doing some of that, I was just thinking about trying this. My whole point of coming in front of the camera was about control, because when you have 300 or 400 grams of yarn and you're dipping it into a pot, you're not necessarily controlling for the amount of yarn that's in the center or how the yarn might fold on top of itself and therefore create some resist in there. So the placement of the deeper and lighter colors is a bit more random, which is something that's fun. But if you have it laid out in a steam pan, even with things scrunched up, and you pour on your dye that's maybe a bit more diluted than the 1% stock, so you can spread out the color further, but you can build the color up and have more control. Even with randomness and non-repeatingness to your colorway, you can have more control over where those colors are placed. And that is something that comes down to preference, because as a dyer, you will learn what kind of techniques you enjoy doing. And then as someone who crafts with yarn, you'll also learn what types of colorways you enjoy converting to a finished product. And so there's so many levels of personal preference here. And you know, there's no harm in doing something that takes more time and more effort if you enjoy the process. This is really, really pretty. It is so subtle. Towards the beginning, I didn't have doubts, but this is the kind of effect I was hoping for, and I didn't know if it was gonna get here. And so not giving too much time for the color to strike, I think was super, super key, and we are stuck. There we go. I mean, I am really, really happy with this. There is still yellow that I'm seeing in here, but the coverage is looking good. And the hard thing now is that I know I only have a little bit of dye left, but I think I'm gonna save it, and I don't think I'm gonna use it. Part of me is like, oh, but you could add it here and here. So I'm just like, I mean, it's really not a lot, but I think I will save it for something else. And part of that reason is that I like where we're at right now. So I'm gonna now add more acid. What do I have in my cup? 1, 2, 3 tablespoons of white vinegar. I'm gonna heat this for another 15 minutes, and then we can check and see. There's like a very, very pale yellow left, but most of the color is in our yarn. I just want to move it, wiggle it a minute. Let's see how this is doing. I mean, pretty good. It's hard to tell if there's any yellow or if I'm just seeing some of the orange reflected over there. But I am going to turn off the heat and leave this to cool so then we can wash it. Let's wash the orange yarn. This worked really, really well. I know right now it might be hard to see, but we've got these soft little variations in here. Now some colors, the dye might strike faster, some might strike slower. So you'll have to play around with how quickly you move things around or not. Because there have been times when I've done things and things have just then averaged out maybe a little more than I was expecting, but this is really, really pretty. All right, I'm gonna add a little bit of some clear dish soap. It is 7 degrees outside right now in Massachusetts, so the cold tap water is very, very cold, and likely the dishwasher or the drain from my dishwasher has frozen, because it's already done this twice in the last couple weeks. But there might be like a tiny hint of something. So I'm gonna rinse this a few more times. I'm expecting that it should resolve though. So I will rinse it a few more times to get the soap out. Okay, we do have a hint of some yellow, just a little hint. So I am going to fill this up with a tiny bit more soap. It's barely any color. It's not something I would worry about really, but I'm gonna go ahead and just soak it. Fill this up and soak it in some soapy water for a little bit, and then we'll pop back in for another rinse. Okay, with a little bit of soap. I mean, it's just like that hair of yellow that was left before. But the good news is that after a long soak, it did not get worse. And so this is not a level that I'm concerned about. It's not a level that seems like if you were to mix this with a white that it would like stain it or anything. So I'm just being honest and overly cautious. But yeah, I mean, it's not very much or very bad. So I'm gonna rinse this a few more times off camera, and then I'll check back in. All right, let's see. There we go. That's great. Okay, I'm gonna go put the yarn through my spin dryer now and hang it up to dry so we can have some conclusions. And here is our finished Scribble painted tonal, I mean, it's kind of almost speckled too, yarn. I'm feeling like it's hard to get an accurate representation of the colors in here, but I think that what makes this different from a more classic tonal is that there's going to be more shifts and variation at a micro level. So it'll be less pooling and feel like speckly without having like tiny micro specks on there. I feel like I've set this up so it looks like there's a maximal difference between the two skeins, but all of them have some of the lighter orange, slightly more yellow patches, and then deeper areas as well. Belle, thank you so much for being my lab partner for this episode of Dyepot Weekly. I really appreciate your support and hope you're gonna love this Scribble tonal type of bright orange yarn. If you at home would like to learn more about how you can become a lab partner or last minute lab partner, go and check out the listings in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. The main difference between the two types of video is whether or not filming of the dyeing has already started or not. Last minute lab partners pick from a list of videos that I've already started filming, and then I will film last minute shout outs to insert into the video. Whereas the other lab partner listing, you pick the yarn base and then I will start filming the video after that. And in the last minute lab partner listing, you can go and see some information about the technique and the final color in addition to the yarn bases. Whereas if filming hasn't started yet, the technique and colors will be a complete surprise. Feel free to reach out on Etsy if you have any questions. And once again, Belle, thank you so much for being my lab partner. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and if you enjoyed this video where I played with a single color, let me know if I should do more. More color on color, using just one thing and playing around with it in different ways. I really enjoy, in general, the Scribble kind of technique of layering colors. But I will admit, this is not the most efficient way to create a tonal yarn. It probably would have been faster to create something that felt very similar to this, to dye a tonal with the orange first. So just kettle dye the tonal, and then take the same color and layer on hearts or something to get those like pops and breaks of color. But then I wouldn't need to do necessarily as much coverage to get quite as much spread. So that is definitely an alternative for doing something similar. But the thing with crafts and with dyeing yarn, knitting, weaving, crocheting, is that you don't always have to do the most time efficient thing. Now, is this a technique I would do if I needed to dye 20 of this colorway? Probably not. There was a lot of back and forth and a lot of hands-on manipulation of this colorway that was a lot of fun, but would be a lot harder to scale up. But again, if you're a home dyer, if you like the results and if you enjoy the journey, go for it. It doesn't matter if there's a faster way. What's important is that you enjoy the creativity. And so I know that I enjoyed myself today. Please subscribe, turn on notifications, give a thumbs up to the video. All these things really help the channel continue to grow. I've mentioned my Etsy shop before, but I have an Etsy shop and a Patreon. You can find links to those and where you can find me on social media, all in the description of this and really all of my videos. Thank you so much for watching.